When Sean Diddy Combs walked into federal court, prosecutors were pushing for more than a decade behind bars. The charges, 2 counts under the Mann Act tied to trafficking, were backed by months of explosive testimony, viral headlines, and a wave of public outrage. Yet when the gavel finally fell, the outcome left even seasoned legal analysts stunned. 50 months in prison, just over 4 years. With credit for the 13 months already served in MDC Brooklyn, plus federal good time deductions, insiders calculate that Combs could be walking free in closer to 2 years. For many, this was supposed to be the trial that set an example, a chance for the justice system to show that celebrity privilege couldn't buy leniency. Instead, the verdict seemed to highlight exactly the opposite. Judge Arun Subramanian's remarks were biting. He called Combs's behavior disgusting and enabled by wealth and power. But his sentence told another story, one that critics say reflects a familiar 2-tiered system where influence softens accountability. The public's frustration wasn't just about the numbers. During trial, Cassie Ventura's testimony dominated coverage. She spoke in detail about so-called freak-off parties, about being forced into acts she never agreed to, about hidden cameras and threats of blackmail if she resisted. Prosecutors leaned into the narrative of calculated control, even producing evidence of stockpiled items and testimony from former employees. The phrase, 1,000 bottles of lube, pulled from the Miami-LA raid, trended for days on social media, reinforcing the sense of grotesque scale. And yet, despite the emotional impact, the final punishment was lighter than anyone expected. Survivors' advocates immediately called the verdict a joke, pointing to the gap between the disturbing evidence presented and the years shaved off the sentence. Online, hashtags about leniency, privilege, and celebrity justice exploded. Meanwhile, whispers began to spread about backroom deals, about prosecutors quietly offering immunity to certain associates in exchange for cooperation. Instead of a decisive closing chapter, the sentencing felt like the opening of a deeper and murkier story. For critics, Combs's punishment wasn't just a warning. It was proof that the rules bend differently when you have money, connections, and decades of cultural influence. Federal sentencing might sound clear-cut on paper, but inside the Bureau of Prisons, the math always shifts. For Sean Diddy Combs, that reality means his 50-month sentence could shrink to less than half once credits and programs are applied. In practical terms, the producer-turned-mogul could be free before most people finish a university degree. But freedom feels far away when the cell door slams shut. At MDC Brooklyn, where Combs spent his first 13 months in pretrial detention, conditions were already notorious. Overcrowding, constant lockdowns, even rodent infestations. Transferred later to a federal medium facility, his celebrity status turned him into both a target and a bargaining chip. Inmates whispered about Combs's commissary, with stories of guards slipping favors in exchange for signatures, stories, or even the chance to be near him. Yet privilege cuts both ways. On the inside, notoriety makes a man vulnerable. High-profile prisoners are often placed in protective custody, locked away for 23 hours a day, or housed in special units where isolation gnaws harder than danger ever could. Sources close to Combs's legal team say he pushed against solitary, insisting he could handle the yard. But reality bit fast. Taunts, stares, and coded threats from gangs who saw him as a trophy. For someone accustomed to entourages and private jets, the hum of fluorescent lights and the scrape of metal bunks mark a violent adjustment. Even so, the Bureau of Prisons offers escape valves for inmates who know how to use them. Substance abuse programs, GED tutoring, or even menial work in prison kitchens can shave months off a sentence. With the right lawyer pushing paperwork, Combs could position himself for early release to a halfway house within 24 months. Still, the optics sting. Critics argue that while ordinary defendants serve their time without shortcuts, Diddy's team is already maneuvering for comfort and speed. Activists have branded it celebrity incarceration, a softer, more strategic version of punishment that bears little resemblance to the crushing reality faced by average inmates. Behind bars, Combs may count days until release, but outside, the court of public opinion sees every tick of the clock as another reminder of how uneven justice can be. If the courtroom stunned observers, the outside world erupted. Within hours of the 50-month sentence being announced, social media timelines were flooded with disbelief. 4 years for decades of abuse? One viral post asked, racking up 500,000 shares in a single day. To many, the punishment wasn't just light. It was insulting. Mainstream outlets leaned hard into the controversy. Morning talk shows aired panels of legal experts and survivors' advocates, all echoing the same frustration. The system had failed to deliver accountability. CNN framed it as a test case in celebrity justice, while Fox News went with the Diddy double standard. Even hip-hop blogs, normally quick to protect one of their own, found themselves split. Some insisted the mogul was being railroaded, a scapegoat in the post-Me Too era. Others said the sentence proved money and fame could still bend justice in ways ordinary people could never dream of. The backlash wasn't limited to commentary. Outside MDC Brooklyn, protesters gathered with signs that read "Justice for Cassie" and "No More Industry Secrets." Survivors groups organized vigils in New York and Los Angeles, demanding Congress look into federal sentencing disparities. A petition calling for the Department of Justice to appeal the unjustly lenient ruling quickly crossed 200,000 signatures. Meanwhile, the entertainment industry scrambled. Brands that had quietly distanced themselves from Combs during trial now issued stronger statements. Partnerships were dissolved, his liquor ventures dried up, and long-standing collaborators deleted his name from credits. Spotify and Apple Music saw spikes in streams of older tracks, but also waves of boycotts as hashtags like #MuteDiddy spread. For younger fans, especially on TikTok and Instagram, the scandal took on meme form. Clips of courtroom testimony were spliced with old bad boy videos. The contrast both surreal and damning. A new generation, unfamiliar with Diddy's legacy, now associated his name less with music and more with abuse. The verdict was supposed to close the book. Instead, it widened the rift between those who still defended his contributions to culture and those who saw his light sentence as proof that power shields predators. And in that space, the debate turned from a single man to the system itself. Sean Diddy Combs' 50-month sentence may be remembered less for what it was than for what it revealed. Beyond the headlines, beyond the memes, the case exposed the fragile line between justice and influence in America's legal system. When a billionaire with decades of cultural weight can walk away with a fraction of the punishment prosecutors demanded, the message ripples far wider than one man's fate. Legal analysts point out that Combs didn't escape prison entirely. Federal time is still hard time. Yet for survivors, the point was never about calendar years. It was about recognition. Cassie Ventura's testimony and the accounts of others painted a picture of abuse that spanned decades, enabled by power and wealth. To watch that reduced to 4 years with credits felt like erasure. The gap between narrative and outcome became the wound. This is where critics argue the system consistently fails. Wealthy defendants hire armies of lawyers, negotiate deals behind closed doors, and exploit programs meant for rehabilitation, not convenience. Average defendants, especially those without resources, serve the harshest versions of their sentences. For them, early release is an abstract idea, not a lawyer's strategy. At the same time, the Combs trial has already shifted cultural conversations. In the music industry, insiders whisper that the era of untouchable moguls is over. Labels and executives now face louder questions about what they enabled or ignored. For younger fans, this may be the moment that permanently reshapes how hip-hop power figures are viewed, not as icons beyond reproach, but as men accountable to the same standards as anyone else. But the larger reckoning is with trust in the justice system. Every high-profile case becomes a mirror, reflecting the gap between the system's promises and its outcomes. And in this case, the reflection was damning. Whether Combs serves 24 months or the full 50, his legacy is altered forever. The trial may fade from headlines, but the questions it raised about power, privilege, and accountability will linger. For some, this was justice delayed. For others, justice denied. For the system itself, it was a reminder. The world is watching.